Welcome to PCI Talk, where we keep up with the ever-changing world of communications and public relations with Public Communications, Inc. Join us as our team of professionals bring you along on our journey with personal stories and industry insider knowledge, from choosing an agency to crisis management and everything in between. PCI is a Chicago-based full-service communications agency serving clients that help our communities and the world in many industries, including healthcare, nonprofit, conservation, and more. Now, let's talk.
Hello, and welcome to PCI Talk. My name is Jackie Rachev, and my colleague Katie Heinz and I are excited to dive into all the topics on how to prepare for a media interview and presentations. As I mentioned, my name is Jackie Rachev. I am a senior account supervisor at PCI. I focus most of my attention in the nonprofit sector, working with municipalities, social service agencies, fundraisers, foundations, and other areas that would fall into that category. Katie, tell us about yourself.
Well, Jackie and I go a ways back. We worked previously for another employer before we both joined PCI, so it's really fun to get to talk to her as part of this podcast, Jackie, to be here with you. Yeah. But I'm the manager of media relations and training here at PCI. So my role in great part is helping to develop some of the trainings for our clients, really tailored and specific to their needs, who they're trying to reach in terms of audience, and their subject matter too. But what I can tell you is, prior to coming to this job, I was a former broadcast journalist. So I was the one asking the questions, which helps me then anticipate what our clients would be asked. So excited to dive into this topic with you, Jackie.
Absolutely. And the fact that you are a former journalist is why we're going to pick your brain today on how to do some really high quality media interviews. So let's talk about why interviews are important. Just a couple things, right? Gets your message out there, right, Katie?
Absolutely.
And so they get your message out there. They provide you an opportunity as a spokesperson for your organization to share your expertise. At PCI, not only do we work with nonprofit clients, more in my sector, but we also have clients that span a whole range of healthcare areas, as well as some clients in the conservation and climate area. So we really represent experts in their respective areas, and media opportunities such as interviews and presentations are a fabulous opportunity to get your message and your expertise and your stories out. So at PCI, Katie, what do we do when we're preparing folks for our interviews?
I think the first thing we do is some discovery on our own, right? Talking to the clients, figuring out what they want to convey, what their key messages are, whether it's an advocacy effort or another, initiative that they're trying to get out, what they want to convey, who they want to talk to, who their audience is. Is it the members of their association, doctors, for example, in the healthcare sector that would be part of a particular medical society, or the general public? And so we look at what they want to say, who they want to reach, and then really help them craft those messages and a training based on that, tailored on that. It's not generic. It's not in any way kind of a one size fits all option, but really tailored to the specific needs. So that's some of the biggest strategy that we have going into it. But Jackie, you can talk to some of the biggest tips too.
Absolutely. That's perfect. And really, the whole point of what our staff here at PCI does is to make sure our clients feel comfortable. And so here are some of our top tips to feel comfortable and prepared for those media interviews. Number one, have a goal and a message. Katie, you addressed this right away. Have a message. What are you trying to say? That goes straight with your goal, but also don't ever go into an interview cold, right? Katie, I know in the past we've had conversations with a full range of experts and folks that we work with, that you never want to go into an interview cold. even the most seasoned people, you and I included, practice what we're going to say in front of a camera, in front of people, in front of a mirror, friends and colleagues, get lots of feedback to make yourself and your presentation better. There is no shame. Katie, when you were a reporter and you had to introduce stories and such, how did you do practicing?
Absolutely. 100%. Lots of times just going through it, going through the messages that I wanted to convey. And I think we'll get into this, but there's a difference between memorizing a statement and just practicing it and having a good grasp of the information, because you don't want to come off as though you're reciting, memorized content. You want it to be authentic, and really, come off as such. But absolutely that practicing, and, you can read it, but until you say it out loud, I think it's sometimes difficult to, verbalize it.
Absolutely. It's always that, I feel it's very much like when you have those conversations in your head and, oh, what would have I said? I should have said this. And it sounds so amazing in your head. And the minute you say it out loud, it doesn't sound so good. So that's why you practice out loud, in front of the mirror, in front of colleagues, and identify the 2 or 3 key messages you want to get across, because your time goes like that. Interview, right? Before you know it, it's gone. And that means you need to state those messages right away, early and often. Just constantly hammer it home and always come back to that message, right? And then have the examples to support your key message. Have a story, have a great, time when you can share an example of something that happened to you or something you saw, something of that nature, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also important to relay your message in terms that people will understand. I think we all have certain words, certain acronyms, depending on who you work for, depending on your profession, that people outside of your workplace or profession won't know. So you can't use those in an interview and just assume that everyone's going to know what you're talking about. You have to spell it out, spell out what you're talking about, explain it, really approach the interview as though someone has only a basic level understanding, if that.
That's perfect. And that's a great segue right into tip number 2. Definitely know who you're speaking to. Know who you're speaking to. The acronyms and the jargon. They're great if you're speaking, if you are in the healthcare community and you're speaking to JAMA, the journal, and, a specific medical journal, or if you're speaking in my sector to Giving USA or a philanthropic reporter, you can refer to donor advised funds as DAFs. But for the general public, your sister, my brother, aunts, uncles, neighbors, they're not going to know what that stuff generally means. So that's a really great tip. What else do you have for us?
Yeah, definitely. I would say, with limiting the use of jargon and acronyms, also limit the use of big, complicated numbers. Giving USA is a perfect example for that, Jackie, in talking about, in billions. And there's a lot of very precise numbers that are reported out in that, a certain point, $billion, which then adjusted for inflation means something a little different. And I think to the general public, it's just like, whoa, you kind of lose me in there. So thinking about limiting the use of statistics, if you're talking to a radio or TV outlet, for example, saying something like 1 in 4 people versus, the exact 250 out of 1,000 people we talked to said this, really simplifying it so that it's memorable, it's clear, and that people will understand what you're talking about. Using stories instead of statistics. Do you have stories, like you were saying, Jackie, those examples to really illustrate what you're talking about, making your points come to life. I think stories resonate. I think they're memorable. I think they are something that people can relate to a little bit better sometimes than the pure numbers alone, for example.
Absolutely. It's the context as with which they fall into. Absolutely. Tip number 3, we are going to make your message stick. There's a lot of talk, there's a lot of words, and it's such a short period of time. So, Katie, we need to make sure that our message sticks. And so how do you recommend we do that?
Yeah, definitely. Flagging is the term we use in PR, right? Flagging those key messages, finding ways for them to stand out in an interview in a really obvious way. So saying something like, this is important because what I want your viewers or readers to know is this. What I think is most important here is just really kind of emphasizing those key points. You can use verbal cues, you can use visual cues if you're on camera, but those are some really great kind of ways to make things stand out.
Well, the one point I hope that our readers or our viewers and our listeners remember is that PCI is here to help them through these opportunities, and we would love to help your business grow and meet all of its communications and business opportunities. So how did I do with that flag, Katie?
Absolutely. That was good. A+.
All right. Excellent.
I love it.
So moving on to tip number 4, Katie, you and I know we've been in this business in communications or journalism in your case for a couple decades, and the type of interview is changing. The format is changing. And a lot of that, in large part to the pandemic, means that interviews are going virtual and they're going on Zoom or StreamYard or even Facebook Lives, which means quality counts even when you're in your own home or you're in your own office. You are becoming a one-person studio operator. And Katie, you have done this as a journalist starting out. So what do you have to keep in mind when you're a one-person show?
Yeah. So I think the virtual interview setting presents both opportunities and challenges. Opportunities in that you can do these interviews wherever you are. It's a lot easier. You don't have to necessarily commute to see a particular reporter. You can do it from your own home, save some of that time. But at the same time, you're all of a sudden in charge of your own lighting, your own camera, your own sound. There's a lot of things that you have to think about. And you just have to think ahead for some of those. I mean, I'll tell you, like right now, I would give myself a C. My lighting's not that great in here. The camera's not perfect. I've got the dog on the bed next to me that could start barking at any time. Those are all things you have to think about. Is there a baby that could start crying? Could your doorbell start ringing? Turning off alerts on your computer. Tatiana, our producer, reminded us both to do that before we hopped on this podcast. All of those things, all of a sudden you have to think about, do you have a plant growing out of your head in the background, or, your husband's dirty clothes on the dresser behind you? You've just got to think about all of that stuff. So we definitely,
or somebody's walking behind you, or we've seen those video clips online that have gone viral and have even made the news of that, like the kids walking in the midst of an interview with the mom or the dad is like, oh my gosh, here's this child, and how do the parents react?
Yeah. Well, and all of a sudden,
people are mortified, and then there was that whole conversation on if it's appropriate and should we be mortified. And the reality, this is what our world is these days. We're doing stuff from home, but you still, and it's not to take away from the humanity. That shows the humanity of who we are, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. But you still want to guard against some of that if you can, if it's under your control, right?
Definitely, because the unfortunate thing is, if someone walks in the background, that's the only thing people are going to see, they're going to pay attention to, and they're going to remember. I mean, like that poor guy who had the little kid in like a walker, and then, the nanny or someone come behind him to get the kid out. That's the only thing. I have no idea what that man was talking about on the interview. That's the only thing I remember, and the only thing that's been played over and over again. So unfortunately, you've got to think about all those things.
Right. It ended up being cute, and the story was how cute it was, and it created a larger conversation. But to your point, the reality is whatever message he was there to get across has been completely and utterly lost.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that we at PCI do is to work with our clients in training sessions such as this. So, if I was a client, you would practice with me on how to handle things like that, or move your camera, or let's open the blinds behind you, and are you sure that your baby is taken care of? Has your partner or a nanny or a babysitter taking the baby out? Do you have signs that say recording and process, do not disturb? That is, a tip of things of that. So that is something that as professionals that you and I are very talented colleagues work and provide tips to help through things of that nature.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Thinking through all those kind of possible factors that could come into play, for sure.
Right. And now, not only is it where camera placements, the lights, and all the things we've discussed, but it's also what you wear. You don't want to be that person with perhaps the top button is, not closed, or you missed a button, or you've got patterns all over, right?
Yeah, definitely. Anything that could possibly distract. You want to avoid the busy patterns, the really chunky jewelry. Any of that is a potential distraction from your message that you're trying to make.
Yeah. We're all for being trendy, but you also have to because you don't want the jewelry juggling and jingling against you, or your microphone, or things of that nature. And honestly, a lot of it comes down to body language as well, right?
Definitely.
Here I am. I'm clearly vibrant. I'm excited to talk about what we're talking about. This is our passion. So, we're excited. You see me, I'm using my hands, I'm bobbing my head. We're definitely engaged in conversation, which is fabulous. And when you are, I feel this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. When you are doing an interview on camera virtual, this helps bring the viewer in, I feel. If you're just sitting here, yeah, that's fabulous. Oh, well, let me tell you about my client. There's no engagement. You lose that excitement. And that's how I view it, and that's how I coach my clients. I would love to know what your thoughts are.
Definitely. I think that's so important to tell your clients to be themselves, talk in a way that they would normally talk, and, use the body language that they would normally use. If they're not always talking with their hands, don't try to do that, because that won't come off as authentic, but just be themselves, and that'll come through, I believe.
Agree. Yeah, definitely. Authenticity is such a key thing, especially today when there's so much cynicism. And that actually brings me to how does PCI clients, or excuse me, PCI practitioners make sure that we are staying on top of the trends and making sure that our clients are prepared as much as possible going into interviews and presentations?
Yeah. I mean, I think there are so many ways, and, keeping up with the news that's relevant to our particular clients and sectors, keeping on top of things happening that could come up that are off topic, but are in the news right now, making sure they're prepared, and some of those things.
Oh, absolutely. And and I think as we as a society move forward and in communications and end up doing interviews at home more often, you're starting to see everybody I know has those rings, those light rings to make sure that you look good on camera, or they figured out how to set up and just tilt correctly the camera and things of that nature. And that's stuff that our staff all look at to make sure that you look your best. Go to Room Rater and see what your background looks like. That was a big thing at the beginning of the pandemic, right? So we make sure not only visually do you look good, but that your message is coming across. And there's a lot of changing and a lot of training that we do with our clients. And, based on if they're going to do a presentation in front of a full house, if they're doing a presentation to a small boardroom, if they're doing a one-on-one interview broadcast, radio, TV, all of that takes different nuances, right, Katie?
Definitely. And I think you really hammered home, just being on top of all of that and advising on all of those points. I mean, I think there's so much more that goes into it and into the preparation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, any last thoughts for our guests before we sign off for the day?
I don't think so. They can send us questions. I know we're putting up a website at the bottom of the screen. They can go to PCIPR.com to read about all of the different offerings that we have and how we can help communicate best.
Absolutely. And we are available to answer questions. Like I said, our areas of expertise include nonprofits, business and governments, healthcare, and conservation. But we look forward to talking with everybody. Please let us know if you have questions. Visit our website. And thank you so much for joining us today on PCI Talks.
Thanks for listening to PCI Talk. We'll see you next time. And in the meantime, check us out on social media for more insider information.